Hello. I wonder if you can hear me. Okay, I'll just start. So hello everyone. This is Qiaosheng Lyu from City University of Hong Kong. I'm very glad to be here remotely presenting our paper between Garment and Prosthesis, the design of an E-Textile musical interface. So to start with, let's have a look at a video demo of this project. So that is a clip of our project Noisy Flash. So as we know, E-Textile are often designed as seamless, comfortable garments, like a second skin. But Noisy Flash, our project, questioned it through investigating the potential of E-Textile interface altering the performing body through representation, deformation, and redefinition. Inspired by feminist artworks that expressively deform the body, like Libu's grotesque limbs or Zangan Ngudi's elastic sculpture. Noisy Flash reimagines the textile interface as a prosthetic extension that encourages the performer to negotiate control and explore exaggerated or unconventional movements. With the concept of countering the neglection of making sound with the body, this project employs the E-Textile prosthesis to reclaim the attention to the unconstrained bodily motion. The knitted textile sensors were designed to resemble the appearance of the redundant body parts. Using regular yarn intertwining with silver-plated conductive thread, knitted with a loosened gusset stitch using a knitting machine, which is just behind me, to create textile stretch sensors that can deform with body movements. As the performer presses, folds, or swings the body, the resistance value changes as the knitted prosthesis deforms with the movement. These are then modified through sampling the sensor data as waveform and then mapped to control sonic parameters like amplitude and sampling frequency, further creating a deep rolling creature-like sound. The audification derived directly from the physical state of the interface, reinforcing the perception of the E-Textile extension as alive during the performance, and the concept of the prosthetic interface. In our project, the prosthetic interface is proposed not as a secondary addition to the body that as garments, but as a transformative extension. Instead of being a transparent interface that attached to the performer's body, the knitted textile sensor protrudes like tumors or actual limbs. This interface doesn't just read movements, it aims to provoke new ones. Rather than offering intuitive and direct control, the performer negotiates the control through the sonic feedback, develop the bespoke movement strategy specific to the interface's unique material and shape to achieve the desired sonic outcome. The performing body, the prosthetic interface, and the generated sound continuously inform and reshape one another, enabling the embodied expression and exploration within this entangled system. So moving forward, we plan to conduct performer interview to guide refinement and the comparison between the garment and prosthetic interface for identify key design principles and to highlight the value of these interfaces in the performance context. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm very happy for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Okay, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was wondering how the audiences have responded to the performance.
Sorry, there's a big echo. Can you text the question to me?
How the audiences respond.
Actually, this project has been played twice in a very relatively private performance scene. So there's not much audience, and there's not very much audience Q&A sessions. But for now, as we collected from several audience from our past performance, the audience have give very positive suggestions, and they have they are very they all respond that they like the appearance of our costume, and they feel like they can relate the sound and with the movement of the performer. But they also have some suggestions to for example, the variation of sound and the variation in movement and the scene settings and these things. And also the performance feedback will be a very important things that we plan to collect in the next stage for analyzing our interface and also the performance setting.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like a wonderful project. I'd love to see it live sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so next we'll introduce the paper Towards Neurodiverse Sensemaking, Pluralizing Agency in Wearable Music and Participatory Workshopping by Seth, Thorn, Anani, Vasquez, Koro, Reutlinger, Margarita, Pivovarova, and Mirka, Koro.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to assume that you guys can hear me. I'll go ahead and start the presentation here. So thanks for reading off the list of authors. My name is Seth Thorn. I'm an assistant professor at Arizona State University in interactive media. This is a huge project that we've been doing for years. I wish that some of the other investigators could be here to talk about it with me, because this is not just my domain of expertise. There's a lot of people involved. So this is a big paper. Maybe it's too big. The reviewers mentioned that it was kind of big. There's a big theoretical discussion that moves towards developing this idea of neurodiverse sense-making. And then there's a bunch of details about the actual research practice partnership that we did for several years. So this project was sponsored by the National Science Foundation CS4L program. And I think I'm required to say that the opinions herein do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the National Science Foundation. So with that, I'm going to move to this slide. So basically, this paper wagers that pluralizing agency is a key affordance of technology-infused arts practices. We should and we want to really leverage this opportunity to suspend or bracket the notion of the atomic individual, right? We want to set up conditions in which such an individual could emerge rather than being presupposed, right? So we can problematize this notion productively to get towards a more dynamic and more porous sense of agency that aligns with neurodiverse experience. In the NIME community, I think as musicians, as performers, we can access these experiences in an intuitive way, an embodied performance, this blurring of certain corporeal boundaries. And of course, collective dance improvisation, you're seeing here in this video, this is really the paragon of this performative subjectivity. And it's kind of the background of our project, basically. You know, there's an important history already in place of trying to change or charge or hyperbolize this experience with responsive media. So here you have, you know, Merce Cunningham in the 1960s on this, you know, responsive stage. I'll just say that collective dance improvisation for our project is a touchstone for neurodiverse sense-making because it diminishes the weight of verbal communication. There's an interfusion of sense and movement, of thought and movement. It gives much to think about thematically. It's very interesting to reflect on. Now, I'm going to mention a concept that really doesn't need an introduction, I think. The ADMI category has gotten a lot of traction since first being proposed by Emma Frid several years ago. And there's been a recent extension of this concept in the form of the CADMI, so the Collaborative Accessible Digital Musical Instrument. And that's a great idea, and we want to intensify this idea and mediate it with the conceptual vocabulary of entanglement. So the proposition of our paper is basically to infuse this notion of the collaborative with a more performative sense of agency that can surface. You know, this language of performativity, I mean, it goes back to gender theory with Judith Butler in the 1990s, but then it goes way back. It goes back to speech act theory in the 1950s, where you distinguish between statements that report on facts and statements that create those facts, these performative utterances. And it's important and interesting to recall that the person who proposed this distinction, J.L. Austin, kind of thought that this distinction might not hold. There seems to be a performative aspect, a performative dimension to all utterances. So this kind of game, this philosophical game of proposing these abstract, distinctive categories, you know, that turn out to be much more porous and intertwined, that's a theme that we keep coming back to when thinking about neurodiversity. So here's the place where we can really see the connection with the conference theme, this proposition for a fourth wave entanglement HCI that builds on Karen Barad's more recent discussions of performativity and agency. Barad has some very recondite expressions that are sort of hard to wrap your mind around, but that's the challenge. Barad says that relations precede relata. Agents come to be through their intra-actions. And this activity consists of what Barad calls agential cuts. Now, I think collective dance improvisation is really helpful here to kind of get that into your mind, because in collective dance improvisation, it's, you know, the presence of 5 bodies on the stage has no implications for the number of subjects on the stage. The economy of subjectivity is constantly flowing and evolving through this kind of flickering of leading and following that's always shifting. So we can do this at a technical level with instruments by creating relational parameter mapping sonifications, but we can also do it at a thematic level. We can think about collectively playable instruments and sort of lead into discussions and reflection on categories of intention and agency and collaboration. And I think, you know, I meant to be playing this video. This is some preliminary work we did with musical wearables, but in the interest of time, I think I'm just gonna push to the next slide here. I think you get the idea. So what I wanted to say here is that, yeah, we have this very lofty vocabulary, this high theory that's really great at NIME, right? But what about actually taking this into schools and talking about it in the context of autism and neurodiversity and learning? That's, you know, is that possible? Can we do that? You know, it's a challenge. These are a few slides from a narrated presentation I did that uses some wearable instruments that drive a web audio app we created, and yeah, embeds some relational parameter mapping sonification. So we tried to bring this to a level that made sense to people, and I'm not sure if we're successful, but that's the challenge. Now, I'd like to get into actually unpacking this term that we've created, neurodiverse sense-making. And as far as I can tell, nobody else has put these two words exactly together. So let's think about it for a little bit. So first of all, there's a longer genealogy here to this term sense-making, but we're primarily drawing on two sources. One is the enactive account of social cognition that was developed by Dieger and DePaulo, and it refers to these domains of sense or meaning that open up in social situations. So, this has happened to all of us. You're walking down a narrow hallway and you're trying to avoid the person who's walking towards you, but you get caught in this emergent symmetry, right? That bypasses your individual intention of just walking by. So you're pulled into this new domain of sense making, of meaning and action that are now negotiated at the relational level. The other thing we're drawing on here, and this actually comes primarily from the TEI literature, but it's a conception of an embodied sense-making that essentially deploys the insights of participatory sense-making towards certain design goals. So in particular, the activation of joyful first-person shared experiences. You're leveraging sensory motor coupling in design to activate joyful interactions, to have people shed their professional roles and activate, felt sense and felt meaning. So I really love this image here of these two ladies. They can't see each other, but they're tapping on this sheet that separates them with magnets. So they're coupled here in the sensory motor way, and they start to get interesting. Perhaps leads to a conversation. So that's one part of this term, the sensing part. And now what we want to do is basically infuse this social conception of sense-making with a neurodiversity perspective. So neurodiverse sense-making would refer to the plenum, to the full variety of all modes of sense-making, including neurotypical and neurodivergent. That's an important clarification to make right away. And maybe something helpful to think about here to get this into our minds is, within this framework of neurodiverse sense-making, we can think of the phenomenon of stemming, right, which is this sort of stereotypical rhythmic autostimulatory behavior in autism and ADHD. We can think of stemming as a performance of neurodiverse sense-making. Now, the interesting thing here to think about is that, well, in fact, everybody does this to some extent, right? You fidget, you tap your foot, you roll a pencil in your hand, you gesticulate as so many ways of regulating sense, of regulating experience, of thinking through gesture. So it's not quite correct to say that this is happening in one domain of sense making rather than in the whole thing for everybody, neurodiverse sense making, right? So once again, it turns out there's a continuum of this activity. And I think this example elucidates a lot for us. It challenges the conventional distinction between sensory input and intentional action, which means it also challenges the distinction between the sensory and the cognitive. So it appeals to a more holistic notion of experience, to a sensory motor approach that is not pre-invested with all of these big abstract categories right up front. Now that's really the key point, to free the ground, to expose a freer, radically empirical notion of experience. And, I think really we should already be there to the extent that NIME and third wave HCI have adopted enactive approaches. You can recall that a central thrust of the enactive approach is that action and perception are undifferentiated, right? We only see what we cognitively manipulate. So the enactive approach jettisons the need to posit some brain-based computational arbiter or intermediary that turns intentions into actions, right? And as a sensory motor approach, it's not pre-invested with distinctions among the senses. So for people with autism, intention and action can slip apart in ways that are uncomfortable. Another thing here that's important is rhythm. Rhythm as a form of analysis cuts across all sensory modalities. Thinking through rhythmic and active sensory motor approaches gets us a more holistic, a messier, a more entangled, a less linear, a less cognitivist notion of experience. And that's precisely what we call neurodiverse sense-making. So an important practical takeaway here is this. A primary target would be studies on ADMIs that, after doing all this careful and thoughtful design work, capitulate to standard evaluation protocols that reinforce neurotypical classical cognitivism. So, questions like, what are the sensory dimensions of this instrument versus what are the cognitive dimensions of this instrument? If you parse things like that, it's very likely you obfuscate what you are trying to clarify, because those categories might just get in the way. So in the paper, we have, here we go. We have a sort of a scaffolding. We can kind of come up with a scaffolding that tells us things to do, or at the very least tells us assumptions to avoid. And we have 3 case studies that we discuss. And I'll just summarize some of the points quickly here. It's a couple of things, a bunch of like thou shalt nots, things not to do. So you should design for cross neurotype collaboration. That means designing for everybody, designing for neurodiversity. You should make adaptable instruments that accommodate varied personal or autistic goals. This is something we notice, is that people are often assume that neurodivergent people have neurotypical goals. You should ask them what's valuable for them, right? So you should not assume neurotypical goals. You should ask the stakeholders what would be helpful or valuable for them. You should not design interventions that ask only the neurodivergent to change rather than adjusting environments or both. A chair, for instance, just a chair scaffolds certain neurotypical assumptions about the compartmentalization of affect and intention. And that's very neurotypical to assume these hard distinctions, again, among these abstract categories that can't easily be cleaved apart for everybody. And I kind of have to return to this over and over again as a teacher. I have to remind myself of this, that they're not always separated. They can move together. Don't presume all participants share the same literacy, verbal, social communication skills, so reading, writing, turn taking. Don't enforce unwritten neurotypical play conventions, because that can be anxiety provoking, or you need accommodations for certain sensory needs. Don't use standardized rating scales or evaluation protocols grounded solely in neurotypical metrics. Don't mandate clear prescriptive guidelines that reflect only neurotypical thought processes. There's nothing natural or given about this Cartesian notion of the value of the clear and distinct. That's a kind of naivety of the Enlightenment, I think. We should get rid of, set that aside, perhaps. And I'll say this, and I know I'm out of time here, it's 15 minutes, but it's not easy to get all of this right. And that's why I'm so grateful to be surrounded by very talented team members who are constantly helping us to course correct. In particular, the second author on this paper, Dr. Anani Vasquez, has been immensely helpful. It seems that my time is up. I'll take 30 seconds here to just say one more provocation that we entertained during this project, which was to link computer science with the neurotypical and computational thinking with the neurodiverse as this less schematized, less categorized thing that can be more open to interpretation. This is actually, originally how CT was conceived. It was conceived apophatically. CT is not this, it's not this, it's not this. And there's a lot more to say about this. There's a video here that I was going to show, but I think I'll have to leave it there. And since I'm in Keynote, I'm going to have to take away this last slide in order to see your questions. So yeah, let me check the chat and see what. Oh.
Are you able to hear us?
Okay.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience? I don't know what I can throw, we might have to do some of you guys.
Hi, it was a very nice presentation. So my question is, this echo is a little bit
closer to your head.
Sorry. Okay. So when we talk about neurodivergent, autism is also one such. Let's say in non-verbal autism, it's how would you even probe or communicate with them what they actually need?
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, there are so many ways of activating this for certain people. Of course, there are cases of autism that are very, very difficult if someone is completely nonverbal. But it's also the case that it's possible to set up certain conditions that facilitate a little more fluidity for different groups of people, and it's never generalizable. You can't. There's no rule that gives you a guaranteed success. It's really having someone in the room who has years of experience, perhaps has autism in their family, and can come in and carefully feel through what could work for different people. And I think that's important. You know, that kind of links this research up with really qualitative methods, where you are really thinking about singularities rather than large-scale quantitative metrics and generalization. So for me, and I don't consider myself to be a neurodiversity expert. That is not my training. That's not my PhD. So I rely on other people to be present and work through that according to the needs of whoever we're with at that moment. But that's a great question. Yes, it's not easy.
Are we have time for one more question to Andrew?
This is amazing. Thank you, Seth. Can you hear me? Hopefully.
I can, a little bit, yes.
Okay, I'll speak up, and there's a weird echo in this room. Thanks for that. That was a really interesting presentation, and I appreciate how you sort of cut through the difficult theory and try to. Sorry, it's really hard to hear with an echo in this room. Is there anything you can do? Okay. Sorry, Andrew. Basically, just to cut to the point. When you do these evaluations, a big question that comes up is, why are you evaluating to begin with? Like, you can do all of these activities and you don't need to do any sort of metrics, except that maybe you want to publish a paper or you want to share what you've learned with other people. So who are you trying to talk to, and what is the motivation for the evaluation to begin with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, on the one hand, yeah, it's wonderful to create instruments for people and find that they're joyful and enjoying them. And why evaluation? Well, the pragmatic answer is that this is an NSF grant. We're required to evaluate, have a way of evaluating our work. We have to create durable knowledge, in the form of written papers. Typically, is the way we disseminate, knowledge durably. This is a mixed methods project. I already mentioned that we lean into the qualitative because it offers a little more freedom from traditional categories and metrics and evaluation. Currently I'm leading. Currently I'm the PI for an NSF ASIL grant, and we're doing circuits with students who are neurodivergent, right? Neurodiverse classrooms. And it's wonderful just to see that people are activated and enjoying it. And it's, and on our surveys, do you see a future in STEM, engineering? They might say no. And it's like, yeah, I kind of feel the same way, maybe, that the evaluation is this extra part. You don't necessarily have to go through that, but we have certain research obligations, and I like making instruments. I think it's fun, and I have other people on the team who are taking care of the loftier research aspects. But that's a good question. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Seth. I think we're going to have to leave it there for now.
Okay.
That was really excellent. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Next up, we have a in-person paper for the session with visually led design for gestural audiovisual instruments by Sam Trolland, Alon, Ilsar, and John McCormack. And Sam here, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
I think you've got one.
Hello. Hello. All right, thank you very much, everybody, for taking the time to come to my talk today. Today I'm going to present about 3 gestural audiovisual instruments that Alon and I created for a performance called Symbolism. And I'm going to talk about the visually led design process through which these instruments emerged. These instruments are using the air sticks, which we presented at NIME in the past, so I'm not going to go into their technical implementation today. But if you do have any questions, please come find us after the talk. So I want to start briefly by just discussing some aspects about traditional and digital musical instruments, which I'm sure everyone here is very well aware. But I just want to focus in on the key difference in that traditional instruments, there is a natural causality between actions and the sounds that are produced. And in digital instruments, there can be a separation of sound from control. And we just got a quote here from Sidney Fells that describes that this necessitates an effort on behalf of the designer to avoid the corresponding cognitive separation. This has been described as the mapping problem by Mays. And here on this slide, I've got a visual depiction of what this might look like. So these are the typical gestural raw data that you get from Anani-based devices. We can calculate some parameters, and that's a direct mapping. And then there'll be this arbitrary mapping that goes from the calculated parameters to how you want to trigger sound events. And that's the aspect that we really have to focus in on in designing digital instruments. So some prior approaches to designing gestural mappings have focused on movement-first approach, and some other prior literature has focused on sound-first approach. And in this particular paper, we focus in on a visual-first approach to designing audiovisual gestural instruments. So I want to take a little moment now to delineate between the design space of an instrument and the instrument itself. So here, when I say visual first, I'm referring to designing a new instrument. And what did that look like? Well, that looked like starting with a series of interactive visualizations. We then met in rehearsal sessions and we played these visualizations. And there was no sounds at this point, it was just movement and visuals. And then later on, we designed sounds that matched with those visualizations and with those movements we designed. So that's the design space, and that's what I mean when I say visual first or visually led. There's also the instrument itself, which is triggered by movement. So the instrument is movement first, but the design and how we develop the instrument, that's where the visual first and visually led design comes in. And this is just a few photos of what that looked like. So a couple of photos from our rehearsal sessions and a couple of photos from the performance. So looking at our motivations for this research and the research questions that guided us. Our first research question was, how can interactive visualizations inspire new ways of improvising, composing, and performing live music? And our second research question was, how can we best develop a system that allows the percussionist to perform naturally while combining digital and acoustic instruments? So in the visually led design, I come from a more visual arts background and a technical engineering background and instrument design. So I focused on creating these interactive visual scenes, which began our process. These interactive scenes or prototypes were designed to either embody a musical concept through visual feedback, or to model a simulation with simple behaviors that interact to produce complex interactions. I'm just going to show a few of these visualizations now. Hopefully you can see them all right on the screen. So this one here is a visualization which attempts to identify discrete strike gestures in continuous drum performance. So the strike gestures are represented with an animation that comes out of the middle of the screen. And this one used a new triggering system which dynamically responded to the energy that was being put into it. So during periods of harder hits, it would raise the threshold, which would trigger a strike event. And during periods of softer hits, it would drop that threshold back down. This is another interactive visualization that represents, I'm not sure if you can see that at all, represents the energy that's being put into it by increasing the orbital speed of some of these interactive objects. So this one was interesting in that the period of rotation was based on how much energy was being put into it and how fast the percussionist was playing. This next one here is similar in that it has a rotating object, but instead of increasing the rate of rotation, it increases the orbital distance. So you can see these kind of spikes, which represent spikes in energy being put into the device. So it's interesting to compare this one to the previous example. They're both rotating objects, they both respond to energy, but this one has a constant period, whereas the previous one, the period or the rate of rotation was based on how much energy was being put into it. And both of these generated very different styles of interaction, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then these last two I'm going to show you are about representing the orientation space of the sensor. So RMU sensors are not able to determine their position in space, but they are able to determine very precisely what direction they're pointing in space. So a lot of these mappings have to reference the orientation space rather than position, which does take a little while to get used to, but that's how we build our mappings for the aesthetics. So this one is representing it through what I call a heat map. So it's glowing hot in areas where there's more time being spent. The next example that's about to come up on the screen in a moment is also representing orientation, but visualizing it in a slightly different way. This one is building up a trail when a phrase is being performed, and then when that phrase stops, the trail then retracts and repeats itself back to the origin. We refer to this in a metaphor as a tape measure. So as you're pulling out a tape measure, depending on how long you pull it out, will influence how long it takes for that system to then retract back in. So I'm going to show a few videos now what the rehearsals look like with Alon playing these visualizations and some of the findings that came out of it. So I mentioned before, this particular visualization had a dynamic triggering system which would adapt to any higher energy and lower energy phrases. And what was interesting was that Alon found that after a period of higher energy strikes, there would be a little while that threshold was settling down to lower strikes that Alon could play acoustically and he wouldn't trigger any digital instruments. Now originally I thought this was an error in the code, something that I needed to fix up, but Alon saw compositional intention or potential with that, and we were able to build that into the show. In this next visualization that I showed you with the varying rate or orbital rate, Alon felt this was more like a task than an instrument. He was very much trying to get the visualization to do particular things, but he didn't feel like he was playing it like he would an instrument. In the visualization I showed you with the changing orbital distance, this one had a constant period, and Alon really tried to lock into that period. He wanted to perform an action at the start or at the top of each cycle, and then perform an improvisation, and then lock in again to the top of each cycle. In the orientation mappings, we really noticed that these influenced two-handed gestures, and it also encouraged Alon to explore the entire orientation space. So in the previous examples, Alon was very much playing in front of him or on his knees, and as soon as the orientation space was involved, Alon was then using the entire space around him. We also, I mentioned before about the delay time being affected by the length of the phrase, and that was a new musical interaction that Alon hadn't worked with in his practice in the past. And so that was a really big outcome for us for this project, was that leading with the visualizations was really able to create these new styles of interaction. So once we had a few of these examples, a few of these prototypes that we wanted to take forward into the performance, we merged a few of them together to keep some of the interactions we liked. We got rid of some of the ones that we didn't like, and we ended up on these 3 different scenes, and each scene was its own instrument. And then to bring cohesion to this performance, we took the visualizations and the interactions we'd already designed, and we decided to focus in on the creative theme of symbols. So we took photographic textures of 4 symbols that we had, and we also took audio samples of those 4 symbols, and that's what became the audio and visual interaction for the performance. And here's a look at what that looked like during the performance, with the projections coming down onto Alon from above, augmenting the symbols with visual projections of symbols, and also augmenting the space accounting on stage. So I want to look quickly now at some of the influence of the visually led design approach. Maybe I'll skip the slide. So reflecting back on that first research question, how can interactive visualization inspire new ways of improvising, composing, and performing live music? Well, we found that each visualization inspired a very different style of percussive movement, and some of these generated new musical interactions, which we hadn't worked with in the past. Some interactions felt more like tasks rather than instruments, while others allowed compositional elements to emerge. The mappings that related to energy were very good at showing a short history of rhythmic phrases. They worked very well as a shaker and were best in intensifying rhythms in an interesting way. Whereas mappings that responded to orientation inspired movements that explored the entire orientation space, and they inspired two-handed gestures. Now looking at our second research question, how can we best develop a system that allows the percussionists to perform naturally while combining digital and acoustic instruments? Well, we did this differently in the 3 scenes of the performance. In the first scene, which we call planes of play, there was a horizontal plane which delineated the acoustic instrument beneath that plane from the digital instrument up in the air above that plane. And I'll show a quick video of what that looks like. Just going to attempt to dim the light so you can see this video. Might be worse. All right, in this second scene, the delineation was based on energy rather than angle. So phrases of higher energy would engage the digital instrument and it would record a loop. And then phrases of lower energy, that loop would then play on repeat. And then in the final scene of the performance, everything was all happening at once. We had a morphing 3-beat sequencer that was being influenced by energy and orientation, and Alon could then play acoustically on top of that. And I'll show a quick video. All right, that brings me to the end of my talk today. I'll skip over this last slide. Thank you very much. And if anyone would like to watch the performance, you can do on this QR code link here. Yeah, if you'd like to get in touch, my mic has been turned off. Yeah, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're already on the questions. Go for it.
Okay. Oh, looks like we've lost part of my microphone. Thanks for the presentation. It was super interesting. I was just curious, in the performance, when making these feedback loops with the visuals and the sound, from my experience doing this, the musician might perceive a causative link, but the audience might view it the other way around. That the musician is playing along with visuals or something rather than causing them. And I was wondering, when you're making this, how you've approached that problem. Like watching the video, if somebody didn't know, might they think that he's following the graphics rather than the other way around? Has this been a problem? And if so, have you adopted any solutions to make the audience get that the causative link is from what the musician is doing rather than what the graphics are doing?
Yeah, good question. I'll try this again. Yeah, thank you very much for that question. I think the way we really approached it in this one was compositionally to think about how we bring in the different elements of the performance. So the first 30 seconds or so was just acoustic playing, and the audience kind of got used to that. They could see that the performer was doing that. And then there were a few gestures that we designed that would really show that the movements were what was triggering the sound. So there was this really kind of first big strike up in the air, which triggered the first digital instrument to emerge. And so we kind of staged it in, and then later on visualization started to come in. So I think by kind of thinking about it compositionally, we attempted to lead the audience on that journey and show them that it was an interactive instrument.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think we've got time for one more. This will probably be the last question for this paper.
Hello.
Hello.
So I have a question. Did you, especially in this evaluation phase where he sort of plays silently with only visuals, if I understand correctly?
Yes.
There is some people, including myself actually, having visual to oral synesthesia. And when you have that, you have a much higher sensitivity to rhythms in visuals. And that might, I was just thinking that might both affect the evaluation of what actually works, especially since it's percussive playing, but maybe also the perception of the final results. Did you calculate with that in mind, so to speak, in the design process?
Yeah, I think, Alon was very much interested in wanting to hear the visualizations. So during that session where we started with visualizations only, I had to say, we're not doing any sound in the session. And Alon was constantly thinking, oh, when I make a mapping, I'm going to make it sound like this. So he was really locked into how he would take these visualizations and create sound with them. And that's what we did in the following rehearsals. But in this rehearsal, we really focused in on visual first. But no, I hadn't considered what that would look like for someone with synesthesia. I think that would be another layer on top.
It's not about what it looks like, it's that the person with this more unusual synesthesia going from visuals to audio perceives rhythms in visuals in a different way. So if the person evaluates has that, it will maybe give a different result.
Yeah.
Other visual mappings might appear effective than if you don't have it. That's what I'm after.
I think that's, definitely true. I think even from a different individual to individual, they would have an affinity for different styles of visualization. But yeah, I did design visualizations to represent rhythm. And I was attempting to show rhythm in there, but how each individual perceives rhythm, I think, could be very different.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sure, thank you.
I don't think my mic is working, but is it? Can I go this? Yes. All right, it's the final session now. What? Oh, it's not the last. Oh, sorry. Okay, next up we have Sonic Perplexity as Urban Acupuncture to Promote Environmental Kinship by Shomit Barua.
Hello. Let me see. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, hi. My name is Shomit Barua. I'm a final year PhD student at Arizona State University, and I'm going to be talking about this project called Standing Wave and how it fits into this greater framework that I've been working on called Hyperwilding. So Hyperwilding was a response to an invitation to collaborate with artist Patricia Sanit in 2022. She had a installation that was called Rewilding, which is in reference to the restoration. It's a conservation effort to restore an area of land to its natural uncultivated state. And so I presented Hyperwilding, which is the introduction of unabashedly synthetic nature emulating environments within urban landscapes. And so This has been an attempt to formalize this practice and think of like some conceptual backing that gives me the justification for this practice. So let's see. So Standing Wave, this is the installation that went up this year. It was commissioned by Bloomberg Philanthropies and the City of Phoenix Arts and Culture Department as a response to the prompt of extreme urban heat. And there were 9 artists that were selected. We all erected shade structures within parks. And most notably, my structure did not include any shade. And so this was intentional in that I was trying to, well, we know that shade works. It's an immediate relief to extreme urban heat. And I wanted to kind of open up the conversation to think about what are some of the more long-term solutions instead of just treating the symptom of extreme urban heat to also look at what are the causes of extreme urban heat. And this basically boils down to that we've become separated from our environments. And so this project is a space for us to become more connected with the environment. And so it consists of 3 things. Number one, you've got these structures in the park. They're lattices that are supposed to resemble sound waves to make the passerby, to remind them of sound. And within this lattice structure are a whole handful. There's 18 total ecoacoustic primitives, these little solar modulated and not necessarily solar powered, or not just solar powered, but solar modulated little modules, little sonic critters. And you can hear, hopefully you can hear this. You can hear the birds responding to this. And yeah, you can even see the bird. Oops. Yeah, you can actually see the bird up in the corner there. So this is the prototype. And this is the end product. This went up in May. And we've got the actual structure here made out of steel and bamboo, or excuse me, steel and pine. And then this right here is my little ecoacoustic primitive. So you can kind of see the design. I included these feathers to kind of remind us of birds. They're designed around this idea of responding to the environment. And so let's see, where do I even start about these guys? So these solar panels actually interrupt the circuit in different places. So as this thing oscillates in the wind, it changes how much power is going into different parts of the circuit. And you can kind of hear it here. Here's a whole bunch of them. And you can kind of hear them changing according to the little bit of shade that falls upon them. So you can see that they're actually oscillating manually, mechanically in the wind. That's what those feathers are doing. And as there's like varying amounts of shade that falls on the solar panels, there's also light dependent resistors. You can also consider the capacitors as expanding and contracting in the heat. And so, we're taking, instead of just straight up blocking out the sun, I was looking at how to use the different elements of the sun and have it affect the articulations that were coming out of this, these little critters. So there's a couple of frameworks, a couple of concepts that I wanted to use to create this framework. So urban acupuncture is a social, environmental, and architectural concept that applies the principles of traditional Chinese acupuncture to urban design. Urban acupuncture focuses on a small-scale, strategically placed intervention within urban fabric to catalyze broader environmental, social, and psychological implications. And by targeting the pressure points of urban life, such as abandoned lots, traffic-dominated streets, or neglected waterfronts, urban acupuncture seeks to reanimate public spaces, foster ecological resilience, and cultivate a sense of place within the ever-evolving urban landscape. And these images are of the High Line in New York. We've got a before and after picture. Personally, the before picture looks much more inviting, but in terms of reclaiming the space so that it can be used by humans in this already urban space, they modified it and built this public park. And then we have the solar punk ethos, which is both an aesthetic and socio-political ethos that envisions a future rooted in sustainability, community resilience, and ecological harmony. Imagines a world where technological advancements coexist with environmental stewardship, a challenge to the inevitability of climate catastrophe, proposing instead a vision of regenerative living shaped by renewable energy, green infrastructure, and localized cooperative economies. And this is not just a utopian theory, it emphasizes praxis. So we've got these two things that are kind of hanging out on opposite ends. We've got urban agriculture, which enacts change in the immediate present, and then we've got solar punk ethos. And to tie these together, I looked at Karen Barad's ideas of agential realism and agential cuts. So Karen Barad's agential realism offers a framework to consider urban sound installations as an intersection of urban acupuncture and solar punk ethos. The urban acupuncture, with its emphasis on small-scale, site-specific interventions, operates as a form of agential cutting within the urban fabric. And these interventions often elicit a moment of disorientation, and this perplexity acts as a pressure upon strategically located points to stimulate broader systemic transformations. And viewed through agential realism, urban acupuncture and solar punk are complementary. The former enacts precise local shifts, while the latter speculates on systemic reconfigurations. And urban sound installation bridges these modes, serving as both immediate intervention and speculative gesture. So the final part of this, there's other people that we can refer to. Is my time up?
We have questions, but yes, there are indications.
Sorry. Sorry, I forgot to set my timer.
That's okay. Thanks, Shomit. Do we have any questions?
Hello. Thank you very much. That's an amazing presentation. I think, as you mentioned, that it's a kind of intervention, and intervention often involves a matter of degree and suitability. So there is a kind of technique called playing birds down, which is common in scientific bird watching and also bird watching for amusement. This technique is actually critiqued in recent decades as it might dramatically alter birds' behavior. As once they are used to the artificial bird sound, they may not respond to their true same species. So I wonder what your opinions on this as the innovation really to reach unintended consequences.
Yeah, that's a excellent point. And to that, I would say that this is primarily contextualizing everything in the urban landscape where it's a built environment, and that's why I'm focusing on synthetic sounds in a synthetic environment. I would argue that the urban landscape is much more a human space than it is, natural. One of the things that I notice about this is that when I have these installations go up, birds not only respond, but they also come and hang out. And I spoke to an ornithologist about this, and they said that the first thing that birds want to do is assess whether or not it's a threat. But after they've assessed that it's a threat or not, these birds just hang out. And so, it's a I don't really see this as harming that that relationship with the birds, and so I think that's pretty much it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
I think the emphasis though is the urban environment.
Got another question just to.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. On the back of that question, I was wondering whether you were familiar with the work by Gilberto Esparza, Urban Parasites. These are little critters that are not pretending to be birds, but they're gobbling up electricity on high wire parasitically in Mexico. This was done in 2007, I think. It might be quite interesting for you to look at, and that doesn't raise the same issues of relationship to the natural creatures in the environment.
I haven't heard about that, but and also the audio is a little murky, but I heard parasites that emulate birds.
No, Urban Parasites by Gilberto Esparza. He created these little robotic figures that were put up on electrical wires and pylons in Mexico City. And
Okay.
they were parasitically using the electricity, and they were a kind of an enlivening force in the city and the urban environment.
Yeah, I haven't heard about that, but it sounds pretty interesting to look at. This is, of course, there's a lot of examples of the solar punk ethos being enacted, especially in Latin countries. But it's definitely something to look up.
All right, thanks everyone. That's it for this paper. Thanks, Shomit. Next up, we have Drawing Space with Rain, the umbrella as a flow interface, and that will be online by Kana Yamaguchi, Yuga Tsukuma. Oh, it's not? Oh, sorry, it's one. All right, and also it's by Yoichi Ochiai.
Good morning. I'll introduce my project, Drawing Space with Rain, the Umbrella as a Flow Interface. I'm Kana Yamaguchi from University of Tsukuba, Japan. One rainy night, the raindrops on my clear umbrella looked like stars. The real skies felt far away, but the sky created by my umbrella felt close, right above me. This sense of distance was saved by my rain itself, by the stars that exist, float, and sparkle right there. The umbrella is a boundary that separates the inside from the outside. While the outside gets wet from the rain, but the inside stays dry. Inside the umbrella, we find a personal, protected space, but outside is a public, shared world. The umbrella thus become not just a shelter, but a boundary between those two contrasting spaces. Unlike buildings, which are fixed in place, the umbrella is a portable. It allows us to carry this personal boundary with us, creating a private space wherever we go. This boundary is not a fixed line. Instead, it is dynamically drawn by the falling rain. As the raindrops hit and fall across the umbrella surface, they trace its shape, giving form to the space around it. In this way, rain becomes more than a physical phenomenon. It becomes a medium through which we perceive the space around us. This study explores how raindrops dynamically draws spatial boundaries through sound by capturing the real-time movement of rain on the umbrella and applying spatial audio processing. We propose a system that transforms rain into an active agent of spatial perception. We reframe the umbrella not just as a protective tool, but as an interactive auditory interface. Fortunately, umbrella is semi-sphere, so it is good for spatial acoustics. This research contributes in three key ways. First, we define the umbrella as an auditory interface. Two, shifting from static acoustics to dynamic, responsive sound fields. And three, integrating natural field motion into spatial auditory experience. To capture the flow of raindrops, we developed an umbrella-shaped sensor device. We use capacitive sensors, which detect changes in capacitance when water droplets make contact. Each panel includes 76 sensors, and the umbrella has 8 panels in total. Since water generally flows vertically, we align the sensors in vertical row. However, raindrops do not fall in a perfectly straight line. They slightly shift left and right as they move downward. Therefore, we set the sensor weight to 3 cm, which we determined through prototyping and testing whether the entire droplet trajectory could be captured. All components except the sensors are fully waterproof. In this system, we convert the trajectories of raindrops flowing across the umbrella into sonic paths in real time. To express the spatial nature of the flow, we applied spatial audio processing. To ensure accurate spatial localization, we use over-ear headphones, considering the role of outer ear. Inspired by the experience I mentioned before, we add a function to change the virtual size of the umbrella. This allows users to experience dynamic changes in spatial perception through sound. This system is designed to detect where raindrops hit the umbrella surface and translate that information into spatial audio. It consists of three main parts. First, the fabrication of electrode. Two, hardware for sensing droplet contact. And third, software for sound processing. Capacitance changes caused by the raindrops are captured using an Arduino, and the data is sent via serial communication to Unity. In Unity, the electron data is mapped onto a virtual umbrella model, which generates spatial audio based on the detected raindrop position in real time. The umbrella consists of 8 panels, each equipped with 152 independent electrodes. Each electrode is composed of 2 layers of copper type, with only one side exposed and the less insulated. The bottom layer uses unprocessed laminate film, while the top layer uses laminated film with 5 by 30 mm rectangular holes, spaced 10 mm apart in both vertical and horizontal directions. Between these layers, copper strips are arranged to intersect vertically and horizontally. By repeating the pattern of 2 strip place, 2 strip skip, 2 strip place again, we create a structure where conduction occurs only when the water droplets reaches the vertical and horizontal copper strip. Each panel is equipped with an Arduino, which receives input from the electrodes via a multiplexer. The multiplexer switches channel approximately every 5 microseconds, enable a full scan of all electrodes in about 320 microseconds per panel. The Arduino reads the sensor values and transmit the data to Unity and Unity on a PC via serial communication. The virtual umbrella is constructed in Unity, consisting of 8 panels, each representing one surface of the physical umbrella. Each panel contains 76 audio objects, each corresponding to a sensor on the actual device. When the sensor value exceeds a predefined threshold, the corresponding sound object is triggered. The sounds are rendered with spatial audio based on their location on the umbrella plane, allowing users to perceive the direction of raindrop in 3D space. The users wear headphones through which they hear the sound coming from the perceived direction of the raindrops. Additionally, the size of the virtual umbrella can be scaled in Unity. This changes the perceived distance and angle of the sound, creating the impression that the rain is falling closer or further away. Together, this system enables users to experience dynamic and immersive spatial perception using sound. So this is our system. Using the developed umbrella system, we conducted a pilot study. Rain was simulated by the dripping device that drops water from a fixed position using a stepping model. In this study, participants performed under two conditions. One is where the umbrella size remained constant, and another where the umbrella size changed randomly during the performance. 3 participants took part in the experiment. All of them met the following criteria. We interviewed the participants after the experiment and received comments from various perspectives. Here are some comments we received about spatial perception. One especially interesting point was cut off from the outside world. Next boundary, even with highly seared head-on, but the sound might still be heard if the umbrella is too close, so too much man effect. I believe it would be necessary to use noise cancelling headphone. Sorry. About boundary, 1 minute, okay. So next, this is attention. I'm interested in the surface. Participants should see attention to the surface of the real umbrella. Next, this is sensation and emotion. All of them are relaxed and safe. Nerve perception, become sleepy or become more aware of the spatial environment. This is improvement. And I need improve technical things like heavy and sound drag, and performance things like more variety of sound. And a new suggestion, I got interesting suggestion. And the other thing, one special interesting point was it felt as if it were being played by the rain and the umbrella. Yes. In conclusion, this study proposed an interactive umbrella system based on the concept of drawing space with rain. Yes. By transforming the motion of raindrops. Okay. Now I make a new one. Now outgoing. And thank you for listening. And I have demo Thursday and Friday, so please come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Is it working? Thank you so much, Kana. Okay, there we go. Have we got any questions for Kana? Thank you, that was really cool.
Hi, Kana. So I really like your umbrella, it's very nice. But from my point of view, there are some countries like where we are not allowed to listen music while walking or driving. If they're using this umbrella in practical purpose, do you thought that this will lead to accidents?
Accents?
Yeah, I mean road traffic accidents.
Sorry.
I mean in practical purpose. When you, this technology is very nice, but
If someone walks and runs into each other.
Ah, so, oh, okay. I think the experience is very fun. So, so if my device can portable, I need some attention from umbrella. So, yeah.
I mean, if you are making this system, the people, the audio experience, the audio experience this person is listening, right? If somehow it will lead to the injuries, road injuries, accidents, what you have thought for that? Maybe, I mean, what system, I mean, there should be some more implementation that we could do. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
I will just rephrase it. So since it actually takes some attention, so when we actually take this umbrella or this entire experience as a for a walk on the street or something, so how will it affect the awareness or the mindfulness?
Oh, mindfulness.
Yes, yeah.
Oh,
Because they might actually lose. Like we have actually seen most of the jaywalking that is actually happening inside the campus. Most of the campuses, people wear earphones and then walk on the street,
yeah.
and then they don't know what's happening outside, so they might actually come out to on a cycle or sorry, I'm not cycle. They call them bikes. People who are coming in bike, they can actually crash onto them.
Yes.
They lose their perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
So on that line, I mean, it's an interesting piece of work for art installation. But do you think that it can actually get into production, commercialization for everyday use?
Yeah, I think so. But so now it is prototyping and like artwork. So if daily use, I need some attention outside information, or now use headphone. But if umbrella can become speaker, we don't need a headphone. So maybe more attention outside can, yeah.
Cool, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think we're pretty much at time. We could do a really quick question. There's apparently a really good morning tea, but that's not till 10:30, so we've got minutes.
Okay. I was wondering, I know one of the pieces of feedback you got from your user participants was like a lot of sticking. Were you able to experiment with materials? Like you said, you laminated on top of the sensors. Were you able to experiment with like car wax and other things that are able to have water run off more easily?
Sorry.
Trying to figure out how to rephrase. Like, what materials did you use for the waterproofing of the sensors?
Ah.
And
Waterproof?
did you experiment with those materials at all?
What material?
What material? Umbrella? Like laminate sheet made of plastic. So yeah, become.
Did you try anything else?
Anything else?
Yeah, experiment with something else?
Different material. I want to use No.
tried?
Try to use. I only try to plastic laminate, so.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank
And
you.
you suggested car wax.
Yeah, I was talking about car wax or other, I was talking about car wax or other materials that could allow water to run off more easily, but still allow for the capacitive sensor to pick up that water's there. Could reduce sticking, possibly.
I want to. Sorry, I'm not. Now I don't think I change sensor, but now sensor is copper, made by copper, but I want to make clear some material like smartphone surface. I want.
Oh, okay, like to make it entirely clear.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to finish up for now.
Yeah, so I think that comes to a conclusion to the first session. Lots of interesting discussions, and Kana is going to set up her demo tomorrow during the process session, so I can keep the conversation going, right? Can feel free to have some chat outside, and we're coming back for the second paper session at 11, and yeah, the presenters feel free to come here in advance to set up. Thanks. Thank you.